When I woke up, I found myself alone in a cramped, decrepit room. No windows, just a rusty cot and flaking walls with sections padded with thick foam. The heavy steel door had no handle, only a small slit at eye level. My head ached horribly, and I had no idea where I was or how I had gotten here. I pounded on the door, shouting desperately for help until my voice went hoarse, but only silence answered. Somehow, I had ended up locked inside what seemed to be an abandoned asylum, left to rot. When the darkness became complete, I huddled in the corner, shaking with fear and confusion. Had I been kidnapped and left here to die? Was I a patient, committed against my will? Nothing made sense. Exhausted, I eventually drifted off to sleep on the frigid floor. I was startled awake sometime later by the bone-chilling sensation of something scurrying across my skin. I scrambled up, gasping, batting my arms and clothing to get whatever vermin off me. But I neither saw nor felt anything now except cold sweat. Phantom sensations plagued me all through what felt like an endless night. Whispers and footsteps surrounded my cell, claws scraping the walls, putrid breaths right next to my ear. Each time I lashed out in panic, trying to catch the culprit, but only empty air met my grasp. When the room finally illuminated again, I wept in relief, but with the light came no answers. Again, my screams for help went unheeded. That small slit in the door was my only glimpse of the outside world, an equally filthy corridor lined with similar cell doors. The next night, my torture continued, with the noises joined now by phantom shadows dancing across the walls, always darting away when I spun towards them. The complete isolation began unraveling my mind. I started seeing vivid hallucinations, ghostly figures wandering the halls, spiders descending from the ceiling, and even the cot levitated off the floor at times. During the brief periods, I managed to drift off. My sleep was plagued by nightmares of demonic faces leering through the slit in the door, bony hands trying to claw their way inside. I'd wake drenched in sweat, whimpering into the suffocating darkness. By the third night, deprived of food, water, and human contact, I had come completely unhinged. I screamed until I lost my voice and frantically scratched at the walls until my fingers bled. Lurking shadows had now taken the forms of grotesque monsters tormenting me. In moments of delirium, I wondered if I was already dead. Perhaps this was some personalized eternal punishment my soul could not escape. There seemed no comprehensible reason a living human would be left to wither without explanation like this. Just when I felt my last shreds of sanity slipping away, a miraculous sound jolted me back, the heavy door unlocking and creaking open. Blinding light assaulted my eyes as shadowy figures entered. The phantom monsters I had imagined them to be vanished instantly. They were just normal people, medical staff in scrubs and security personnel. They spoke in calm tones I could barely comprehend after days of hearing only my own hoarse cries. I begged them to tell me where I was and why I'd been abandoned here alone for so long. But they only smiled kindly and said it was time for my state-mandated vacation to be over. They escorted me gently down the brightly lit corridor as I shielded my eyes. I stumbled in a confused daze between reality and waking nightmare, the lines permanently blurred. I still do not know to this day if the asylum was real or just some macabre vision. Those endless haunted nights left permanent scars across my psyche that have never fully healed. The doctors say it's unlikely someone could have simply forgotten institutionalizing me there against my will. Yet the vivid memories and scars haunting my body insist those horrors were true. Glancing into dark closets or down shadowy basement stairs still summons the primal terror I experienced in that place, real or imagined. The only certainty is that I emerged from that ordeal forever changed, some fragile thread of sanity severed for good. Perhaps it's a coping mechanism, my mind rejecting a traumatic truth too horrible to accept. Or maybe the demons that seized me in the dark live on solely in my shattered psyche, tormenting me still. All I know is the line between reality and nightmarish illusion will never be clear to me again. Those empty corridors and cramped cells are as vivid as yesterday or a lifetime ago. When I opened my eyes, all I saw was darkness, thick and heavy, pressing in on me from all sides. I blinked hard, disoriented, trying to figure out where I was. Lifting my aching head revealed I was lying on a cold concrete floor, but the blackness surrounding me was impenetrable. Testing my limbs, I found my ankles were shackled and wrists bound. Panic rising, I screamed for help, my cries echoing back at me off unseen walls. The musty, stale air indicated I was likely in some kind of enclosed cell, but no one responded, leaving me isolated and restrained in this terrifying void. My mind raced, trying to remember how I could have ended up imprisoned like this, but my past was a blurry haze. The throbbing in my skull told me I had likely been struck unconscious and dumped here, but by who? And for what deranged purpose? Time dragged on interminably, measured only by my shallow breaths and sporadic screams. Numbness set into my limbs pinned beneath me. Then suddenly, a blinding light switched on overhead, searing my dilated eyes. I writhed and moaned like a caged animal. As my vision adjusted, I took in my surroundings. A tiny, decrepit room with padding shredded off the walls and stains covering the floor around me. It appeared to be an abandoned asylum cell of some kind. But what was I, a seemingly ordinary man, doing locked inside such a nightmarish place? When footsteps finally approached, I cried out desperately. A small sliding panel in the door scraped open, revealing a pair of spectacled eyes peering in. A man's voice asked me coldly, "Are you ready to begin Phase 2? Before I could respond, the panel slammed shut, leaving me in darkness once again. The maddening cycle continued endlessly, hours of sensory deprivation punctuated by blinding light and vague questions from my unseen captors about phases of whatever experiment I was clearly an unwilling participant in. Their refusal to explain both infuriated and terrified me. Soon the cruel sensory extremes took their toll. I started hallucinating, visions of grotesque faces appearing in the dark to taunt me. Phantom bugs crawled under my skin as ghostly whispers filled my ears. But the cycles did not stop, even as I descended deeper into madness. When the light finally came on after days of darkness, I found myself unable to open my swollen eyes at all, just scream and sob pathetically. The voice sounded again at the door, asking if I was ready for Phase 3. Through the delirium, I managed to plead for mercy, for rest, for this torture to end. But my begging only brought sinister, satisfied laughter. In the following weeks, or what I gauged to be weeks in my state of isolation, things progressively worsened. My filthy cell became overrun with scurrying rodents who gnawed at my skin and clothes. Still, my captors refused to acknowledge my frenzied cries about vermin infestation. By the time the rats started chewing my extremities down to the exposed bone, I was sure this was hell itself, specially designed as punishment for whatever sins I had committed in life. I no longer recalled a time before this endless suffering. Madness had become my natural state between the light and dark cycles. But today, when the panel scraped open, for the first time it did not close immediately. Instead, after many long minutes, the heavy door slowly creaked outward. I cringed from the blinding hallway light as several sets of footsteps entered. Shadowy figures in lab coats stood over me, observing my gnawed limbs impassively, making notes on clipboards. They spoke as if I were an animal in an experiment. Subject is no longer viable for Phase 4. Recommend we dispose of it and move on to fresher specimens. Their words barely penetrated my shattered mind. As they dragged me from the soiled cage I had come to know as home, I descended fully into welcoming oblivion. Perhaps soon I would awaken from this never-ending nightmare. But as I slipped into darkness, I heard one last unsettling phrase: "Administer the amnesiacs before dumping it." Then nothing. I jolted awake in my own bed, drenched in sweat as usual after the recurring asylum nightmare. Had I really been trapped for weeks, brutally tortured? Or was it another vivid creation of my unconscious? The only clues were deep scars around my wrists and ankles that doctors have never been able to explain. I pray each morning as I take my medications and prepare for the day that the antique asylum I dream of nightly is just that, a dream and nothing more. But a growing dread whispers inside me that the truth waits somewhere deep in my damaged psyche, far worse than anything my sleeping mind could conjure. For now, though, I cling desperately to what I believe is reality. running from the horror those lightless rooms still hold in the darkest depths of memory. It was meant to be a harmless night of exploration, a chance for me and my friends to scare ourselves silly in an abandoned asylum on the edge of town. We had all heard the stories about the psychiatric hospital shut down decades ago under mysterious circumstances. Like stupid kids with no sense, we decided to sneak in and see if the urban legends were true. There were 6 of us laughing nervously as we approached the decaying building, using the beams of our phones to light the way. We slipped through a broken window one by one, drunkenly daring each other to go deeper into the ominous complex. The deeper we ventured through the crumbling corridors, the more unsettled I became. Graffiti and debris covered the peeling walls and dirt-caked floor. Heavy cobwebs filled the corners, clinging to our skin as we passed by. It reeked of mold and sickly sweet decay. My friend Kira screamed as a rat darted across her feet, its squeaking echo amplified in the vast emptiness. I started questioning if coming here had been a mistake, but my protests were drowned out by the others' drunken antics. Pale moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting ghostly shadows. We entered what must have been the common room, with overturned tables and chairs strewn about. Clearing away the dust revealed scratched games of tic-tac-toe and other carvings etched deeply into the tabletops, as if by frantic hands. A curled photograph tucked into a crack portrayed a girl not much younger than us, smiling blankly. Needing a break from the oppressive atmosphere, I wandered into an adjacent room. In the beam of my phone, debris-covered medical equipment glittered ominously. Beds with frayed straps, rusted carts of needles and blades glinting. A faded sign on the wall read hydrotherapy room. I staggered back to tell the others I was getting seriously creeped out and wanted to leave. But suddenly I realized the labyrinth of shadowy halls had gone eerily silent. The group seemed to have vanished deeper into the crumbling asylum. Panicked, I backtracked, calling their names hoarsely. Rounding a corner, I collided with a cold, grimy figure, releasing a blood-curdling scream until I realized it was just my friend Mike. But his eyes were filled with a terror that mirrored my own. Behind him, the others emerged, visibly shaken. "We have to get out of here now," Mike cried. "This place is evil." He babbled about dreadful things they had witnessed in the halls that I could scarcely comprehend in my own panicked state. The group fleeing in blind terror, we quickly became lost and separated in the twisting corridors. Alone now, I noticed the air had become colder and carried a sickly sweet metallic scent. I could hear the others screaming intermittently, but all my attempts to follow their panicked cries only led me deeper into the bizarre maze. I tried hopelessly to find windows or stairs, but endless locked doors blocked my path. Many towered over me, heavy and metal with only a small wired window. Inside, I glimpsed what looked like frayed straitjackets scattered across dingy beds and twisted human forms contorted unnaturally in the shadows. I rushed away from those grim cells, turning down pitch-black side corridors, needing to find any way out. Then a hand grabbed my shoulder roughly from behind. I spun around with a shriek, nearly fainting when I saw it was Mike, his face even more ghostly and haunted than before. But before I could speak, he vanished back into the darkness. I ran blindly, no longer caring if I was headed deeper inside. Anywhere was better than the inexplicable horrors these damned halls seemed to summon. Finally, I spotted the glow of moonlight ahead and nearly wept. An exit back to reality had to await there. Bursting through the last decrepit door, I skidded to a halt in dismay. There was no escape here. Just a small, filthy courtyard enclosed on all sides by the asylum's imposing brick facade. In the center stood a twisted oak tree, its gnarled limbs clawing at the night sky as if trying desperately to escape. Exhausted and out of options, I collapsed under its twisted branches, choking back sobs. Perhaps someone would find me come daylight, authorities or urban explorers. Until then, I had no choice but to wait here and pray none of the terrors inside found me again in the darkness. A sudden loud bang made me cry out, but it was just the heavy door I had come through, blown shut by the night wind. Then silence descended, far worse than any phantom sounds had been. I clutched my useless phone, its battery long dead. The full moon cast strange shadows through the barren tree branches. With no stimuli but the darkness playing tricks on my eyes, my mind couldn't help but wander back to the hellish things I had glimpsed inside. I shuddered to imagine what might have gone on here in the asylum's operational days. Cries of anguish muffled by thick brick walls day and night, endless confinement cramped inside those lightless cells. Somehow the absolute isolation of this courtyard late at night felt even more terrifying. Fatigue finally forced me into fitful unconsciousness right there beneath the old elm tree. But my sleep was plagued by visions of Mike and the others, their pleading faces pressing against the small windows of the locked wardrooms. I jolted awake, but the night was still impenetrably dark, the courtyard eerily silent. The hours until dawn passed at an agonizing crawl. I pinched my arms to stay awake, certain something unnatural still lurked in this place, waiting for my defenses to falter. But morning's light finally crested the imposing brick walls, breaking the spell of darkness blanketing the courtyard. I stood cautiously and glanced around. Daylight lent the space an almost peaceful aura, just unkempt vines and chipped concrete. Had we imagined the unspeakable horrors in our reckless nighttime trespassing? Shielding my eyes, I stepped through the door, scanning for any signs of my lost friends. Instead of the gloomy corridors, daylight revealed only a small empty nurses' station and sterile white hallways. Morning staff milled about, eyeing me curiously. A woman approached, asking if I needed assistance. Before I could reply, she smiled kindly. "Oh, sweetie, you must have gotten turned around on your way back from the bathroom. Let's get you back to your room." Numb with confusion, I let her lead me by the arm through the pristine, brightly lit halls. She kept up cheerful small talk, reminding me of arts and crafts in the common room that morning. Back through a heavy door, she sat me down gently on the bed inside. "You rest here for now, we'll have breakfast soon." She bustled out and the lock clicked heavily behind her. Bewildered, I glanced around the small padded room with its simple bed and nightstand. An IV stand and collection of pill bottles sat ominously in the corner. Panic rising, I rushed to the door, pleading for answers, but she was already gone. Trembling, I backed away, struggling to understand. Had any of it been real? The decrepit halls, gruesome rooms, lost friends? Or had it only ever been vivid delusions of my fragmented mind within the confines of this asylum? Perhaps I had imagined it all. My friend Mike and the others only twisted versions of real staff and fellow patients. But something deep down whispered that, real or not, I had glimpsed a terrifying truth, remnants of long-buried suffering and cruelty still lurking within these walls, waiting to seize the unsuspecting mind. Whether real or imagined, the horrors we had awoken were not so easily dismissed, come daylight's rationality. The only certainty was my life would never be the same. I would never fully trust my own mind or senses again after the things I witnessed in the darkest hours. Now I can only wait fearfully to find out if those grim visions return to me again when darkness falls.